Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. This is the NCERT Foundation series wherein we'll study the subject of political science or polities with the help of MCQs and PYQs. So without further ado, let's plunge in. Let's begin with the previous day question. Which of the following pairs is correctly matched? A. Motilal Nehru, Chairman of the Drafting Committee. This pair is incorrectly matched. Everybody knows that the Chairman of Drafting Committee was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Incidentally, Motilal Nehru was the head of the Nehru Committee in 1928, and this committee was actually assigned the responsibility of drafting a constitution for India. Option B, Rajendra Prasad, President of the Constituent Assembly. Absolutely correct. Mr. Rajendra Prasad was the President of the Constituent Assembly and then went on to become the President of Independent India. The first President. C. Sarojini Naidu, First Defence Minister. No, actually not. Sarojini Naidu ji was a very famous poet and a freedom fighter, but the first Defence Minister of India was this gentleman called Sardar Baldev Singh. Alright? Sardar Baldev Singh ji was the first Defence Minister of India. Option D says B.R. Ambedkar, first Prime Minister of India. I think this merits no discussion. We all know that the first Prime Minister of India was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Question number 1. Which of the following is not a minimum condition for a democratic election? A. Universal adult franchisee. We know that this is actually the bare minimum, the most essential condition for a democratic election, that every adult who is 18 years of age should get the right to vote and that every adult's vote has equal value. This is, if you recall, we did this in the very first video on democratic politics. Option 2, equal value for each vote. Again, a corollary of this. We did discuss this, the concept of universal adult franchisee and how every adult's vote has equal value, must have equal value and has equal value in our country. 3, regular elections at intervals. Of course, it is a minimum condition because you cannot choose one representative for an eternity and hope that this is how things will run. Suppose you have certain grievances or you are dissatisfied with the government. So you'll need to conduct regular elections in order to get your grievances addressed and to change government in case citizens are dissatisfied, right? Now, candidate must secure more than 50% of the total votes polled. Is this actually a minimum condition? No, the winning candidate should simply have the maximum number of votes. That is, he or she should have more number of votes as compared to his other counterparts, okay, other competitors. So, this securing of more than 50% of votes is actually a concept which is known as absolute majority, where in order to win, the winning candidate must get more than 50% of the vote, or let's say 50% of the votes and above. But does this system take place in India? No, not really. We follow something called first past the post system. We follow something called first past the post system, wherein a candidate who secures the maximum number of votes, wins. So, for example, the total votes polled are 100. Okay, let's consider that 100 votes have been polled and 3 contestants A, B and C are fighting the elections. We have 3 candidates. Now A gets 40 votes, B gets 35 votes, and C gets 25 votes, right? So who wins the elections? A. Candidate A wins the elections because candidate A is the preferred candidate, because most of the people prefer candidate A as their elected representative, even though candidate A has not managed to secure 50% votes. All right. So this is the system that we follow in India. So this option can be ruled out. So we have the correct answer, which is option D, since this is not the minimum condition for democratic elections. Now here quickly, let's take a glance on the conditions of democratic elections. We have seen something like this in our preceding lectures as well. Let's quickly take a glance. Democratic elections, one person, one vote. Every person has equal value when it comes to their votes. This is known as the concept of universal adult franchisee. There's a real choice and a free contest. Remember the case of the CPC or the Communist Party of China, where all candidates were pre-approved by the ruling party. So the citizens did not really have a real choice and there was no free contest, because only the allied parties to the CPC were allowed to field in the elections, field candidates in the elections. Of course, there are regular elections held, we just discussed, in order to redress grievances or to topple the government in case of dissatisfaction. Now, preferred candidate wins, not absolute majority, but a candidate who is preferred by most of the people. And finally, we have free and fair process. Once again, let's discuss what fair means. Fair simply means that the ruling party should be capable of losing the elections, and the citizens should have real actual choice. They should not be coerced to vote for people they do not wish to vote for. Next, in India, minimum age to contest elections for Lok Sabha or state assemblies is, now remember we are talking about the minimum age, and to contest elections, not to vote in elections. What is the minimum age to vote in elections in India? It is 18 years, right? It is 18 years. Now, to contest for elections for Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, you have to be minimum 25 years of age and you have to have your name in the voters list. So your name should be there in the voters list and you should be at least 25 years of age. You can be more than 25, but you have to be at least 25 years of age. Now for municipalities and panchayats, your local bodies, the correct age is 21 years. For your local bodies, panchayats, the minimum age to contest elections is 20 years and 30 years is the minimum age to contest elections. The elections to the Rajya Sabha are not held in the manner for the Lok Sabha. They are held differently. We'll study them as the series progresses. But for now, let's understand that you have to be minimum 30 years of age in order to be eligible for a seat in the Rajya Sabha. All right? For contesting for a seat in the Rajya Sabha. Now, there's also a minimum age limit to be the President of India. In order to be eligible to fight for the president, to fight for the position of the President of India, you have to send me that age, the minimum age, in the comments section. The correct answer over here is option C. Which of the following bodies conduct elections in India? It's a fairly straightforward question with a fairly straightforward answer. Option B, Election Commission under Article 324 has the power to supervise, direct and control elections to the Parliament. Parliament means Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. State legislatures. State legislatures and to the position of the President and Vice President of India. Alright, so we have our correct answer, which is option B. Question 4, which of the following best explains why constituencies in India are periodically readjusted? Now let's try to understand this concept of constituencies first. What is a constituency? A constituency is basically a geographical area from where an MP is elected. Okay. Now these constituencies are periodically readjusted. Let's try and understand why and how. Now let's try to understand this concept. Suppose there are two states, A and B. A has a population of 50 and B has a population of 100. Can these states be considered to have equal value for their votes? No, because here 50 votes are equivalent to somebody's 100 votes, which means these votes have greater value, greater weightage. So in order for each vote to have equal value, the concept of constituencies was arrived at, where roughly the same amount of population was decided for each constituency to choose their leaders from, which means suppose we decide that the population would be 25 for one constituency. This is the rough population. Okay, so here we'll see that only two constituencies, 1 and 2, are created and we can get only 2 MPs from here, one from here, one from here. But here with 25 members, we'll have 4 constituencies, X, Y, Z, Alpha, and therefore 4 elected representatives. All right. So every vote here will have equal value. Now, of course, as the population changes, these boundaries will be readjusted. Right? These boundaries will be readjusted again in terms of that proportional population, in terms so that every state has roughly the same value for vote. Of course, the boundaries will have to be readjusted, and this will happen after the delimitation exercise, which is based on the census. So this is again a more complicated process that we'll study in the upcoming sessions. But for now, this I hope is clear to you. So let's say, why are constituencies periodically readjusted? The option A over here says to ensure every state gets an equal number of constituencies. We just saw in the example, it's not about equal number of constituencies, but about equal value of votes. It cannot be that a state with a lesser population has the same value of vote as the state with more population. All right. So this is not the correct answer. To balance population shifts and maintain equal value for each vote, this is exactly what we understood. This happens to be the correct answer. To favor underrepresented political parties. No, there was no talk of political parties when we try to understand the concept. On the contrary, if we are adjusting the delimitation exercise according to political parties, then this would amount to something called gerrymandering. All right. This means adjusting boundaries, doing the delimitation exercise in order to favor one political party. So this is not what we are doing over here. We are actually trying to provide equal value to every vote. And option number D is to provide more constituencies to larger states only. No, if a smaller state has more population, it's likely that it will have more number of constituencies. So it's not about larger states, smaller states. It's actually a geographical area which is roughly based on proportional share of population. All right. So the correct answer over here is B. Now, before we move forward, I'd like to draw your attention to the NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. The admissions are now open to this course. This course provides you 150 plus classes covering all your basic concepts from your basic NCERTs. And it is valid for 2 years, which means you can access this course 2 years from the date of admission. Now, the good point is that if you get yourself enrolled in this course and you visit any of our offline physical centers and enroll yourself in the IAS GS Foundation classroom course, then the fee equivalent to this NCERT online course fee will be waived off for you. It will be waived off for you. All right. Now, if you want more details, you can click the link in the description, or you can call 87501 87501. The term first past the post system refers to A. Candidate who secures absolute majority of votes is elected. We've already discussed this in, I think, our first or very second question. No, this is not the correct option. We are talking about the preferred candidate. Option B, candidate who secures highest votes, even if not the majority is elected. Absolutely correct. Candidate chosen by consensus of all parties, no. And candidates elected through proportional representation, also no. So this is our first past the post system. The correct answer is option B. Question 6, which of the following is not permitted under India's election campaign laws? Now, what is exactly India's election campaign laws? It is basically Representation of the People's Act or RPA 1951. So there are two RPAs. One is 1950, also the Representation of the People's Act 1950, and this is 1951. Now, 1950 Act deals with delimitation and allocation of seats and all of that, whereas this actually deals with the conduct of elections and the qualification and disqualification of candidates and so on and so forth. Along with this, the ECI also brings out the model code of conduct for elections. Now let's see one by one what is permitted and what is not permitted under our election laws. A. Spending up to rupees 25 lakhs by a Lok Sabha candidate. So now, according to the latest amendments to the RPA 1951, which took place in 2022, the limit was raised to around, I think it was 95 lakhs for big states and 75 lakhs or 90 lakhs for big states, 75 lakhs for relatively smaller states, where a candidate can actually spend this much amount if contesting elections for a big state, if for a small state, 75 lakhs. And so, if they're contesting for the legislative assemblies, then the limits are 40 for bigger states and 28 when smaller states are concerned. This is in terms of lakhs. So clearly, spending up to rupees 25 lakhs by a Lok Sabha candidate is permitted. All right. So there's nothing wrong with this. B. Promises of new trains or roads in manifestos. Again, this is very much permitted. New trains and roads are very much permitted. I mean, if you do not promise development to your voters, how are you going to persuade them to vote for you? So, of course, you have to be promising all these things, but you have to also be very cautious that you do not make these promises after the dates of elections are announced. All right, that is not permitted, but this, I think, is a worthy promise to make to the citizens. So this is permitted. C. Appealing to voters in the name of religion. Absolutely not. We know how our constitution stresses on non-discrimination in the name of religion or other factors, but particularly religion. This cannot be permitted under any law. You cannot use religion to appeal to your voters to cast their votes in your favor. And D, use of party symbol. Of course, party symbol will be used. It is very much permitted and it is very much used. You see various election symbols, party symbols, when the campaigning or door-to-door canvassing is happening. So the correct answer is option C. Moving on, consider the following statements about reserved constituencies in India. We've already clarified what the meaning of constituencies is. Now, reservation in constituencies applies to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes for legislative elections. So, this is a correct statement. We do have reservations that applies to SCs and STs. 2. The number of seats reserved for SCs and STs is proportional to their population share as per the latest delimitation. Of course, so this is the entire purpose of the delimitation and this constituency readjustment exercise, to make sure that people get value, equal value to their votes as per or proportional to the share of their population. That was the entire idea when we covered that example. So this is absolutely correct. They have reservations, but only in proportion to their population share. Okay, this is very much in proportion, so as not to feel others left out. Okay. Third, reservation is provided for women in local body elections. Yes, this is absolutely correct. There is reservation for women, at least 1/3 in local bodies. But now there's also reservation for women by this adhiniyam called the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, which provides for a 33% reservation to women in the parliament, but this will be effective after the census. All right. So we do have reservation for women in the panchayats and local bodies. And we can see that all three statements are correct. Hence, option D is the correct answer. I hope this is making sense to you. Which of the following challenges to Indian elections is correctly matched? Money power gives unfair advantage to richer candidates. This is absolutely correct. So, a candidate with more money is going to have a greater advantage or an edge over a candidate who is more honest but poor, right? So if you look at it, this is actually a challenge. If I have more money, the party knows that I will be able to do my campaigning very well, because I'll be able to spend a lot of my personal wealth as well. All right, in door-to-door canvassing, in luring voters in some way or the other. So the problem over here, the challenge over here is that because of my money, another candidate who's likely to be a better leader than I am and who's going to be more honest in his work but is poor is going to suffer, right? Is going to lose out in this race. Let's make it option 1. Now, criminalization. Candidates with criminal background secure tickets. Now, this is also very correct. This is very true. So, if I have a criminal background, I will be viewed as someone who's more intimidating, who's perceived as more dangerous and scary, and hence voters will be afraid of me. And just out of fear or intimidation, they might very likely vote for me. So, this is actually correct, and the meaning also is very correct. The third is dynastic politics. Families dominate party ticket distribution. You can see that in our country as well. And also the challenge over here is not just that the families are being biased or, playing favorites with their own kin. The problem over here is that the internal party democracy gets challenged. All right, this gets questioned. So this is the challenge that occurs. Now all the challenges are absolutely correctly matched. Hence, option C is our correct answer. Which of these factors indicates the strength of India's electoral system? So we are obviously looking for something positive over here. Ruling parties often lose elections. Is this a strength of India's electoral system? Yes, like we've been discussing since the very beginning of our sessions, that this actually is one of the most important criterion of a free and fair democracy, a free and fair election, that the ruling party should be capable of losing the election. B, high number of candidates with criminal background. No, this is not a strength, this is actually a weakness. C, excessive use of money in campaigns. Again, not something to be proud of, not something you can boast of as your strength in terms of elections or electoral system. And finally, lack of real choice between major parties. Now this is again not a strength, this is sadly a weakness, but fortunately we do have option A, and therefore option A is the correct answer. Last question, which of the following reflects the independence of the Election Commission of India? Now in order to conduct, supervise, direct and control free and fair elections in India, the body that conducts those elections ought also be independent, right? Election Commission cannot be committed to any political party. It cannot be committed to any political party. Otherwise the elections will not be free, they will not be fair, and they're very likely going to favor the ruling party or any party that the Election Commission of India vows its allegiance to. Now, what are the factors that ensure its independence? Let's just check. A, it is appointed by the president, removable by simple majority of parliament. Now, yes, this is correct. This part is very much correct. The Election Commission is appointed, the CEC is appointed by the president. But is he removable by the majority of the parliament? No, this is a very simple process. And if you make a process simple, then that process will be followed according to the whims and the fancy of the party with the majority in the parliament. So this is not correct. In fact, in order to remove the election commissioner, you have to follow the process equivalent to the impeachment of the judge of the SC of the Supreme Court. So this is a very difficult process about which we'll be studying in detail in subsequent lectures. But for now, please understand that this is a very difficult process. It's not easy to remove a sitting judge of the Supreme Court, and therefore, the Constitution has assured the independence of our Election Commission by getting it appointed by the president, but making the removal process very, very difficult. B, appointed by the parliament directly. No, we just saw that the election commissioner is appointed by the president. C, enjoys security of tenure, not answerable to government. Yes, that is the whole point. So they have a security of tenure, meaning they cannot be removed at the pleasure of the president or the government. They enjoy a security of tenure before which they cannot be removed, and they are not answerable to the government. This is, of course, what ensures their independence in the electoral process. And option D, functions under Ministry of Law and Justice. No, if they function under any ministry, they are going to have an allegiance to the ruling party or to the government, and therefore will not be able to ensure their own independence. Therefore, option C is the correct answer. Now again, before I move to the practice question, let me draw your attention to the NCERT online course for your UPSC foundation. The course provides you 150 plus classes with a validity of 2 years. The good point over here is that if you purchase this course and visit any of our physical offline centers for this IAS GS foundation classroom course, then the amount equivalent to the amount that you've paid for this course will be waived off. All right. If you want more details, please click the link in the description box, or you can call 87501 for more details. Now let's look at the practice question. For election to the Lok Sabha, a nomination paper can be filed by who can basically contest elections for the Lok Sabha, who is eligible. Option A, anyone residing in India. Option B, resident of the constituency from which the election is to be contested. Option C, any citizen of India whose name appears in the electoral roll of a constituency. Or D, any citizen of India. Now please send us your answers in the comments section. If you found this video useful, please like, share and subscribe. We'll meet another time with more questions and a different topic. Thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.